I have 20 balls in the air and I'm like doing okay and I'm doing it, but I'm kind of surviving all of this. And it was just this push for a really long time that I was like, I'm doing this, but I don't feel great about it.
Hi, it's your friend Lizzy, and welcome to another episode of Lean In With Lizzy. So I want to start with a question for you. Would you be willing to walk away from everything you built, everything that made sense, if God asked you to? That's exactly what today's guest, Taylor McAllister, has done. You might know her from her popular app, the MacFit app, the fitness app she built to help women get strong and healthy. But what you might not know is that she recently made the bold decision to walk away from it all. Not because it wasn't successful, not because she didn't love it, but because she felt called to let it go. And that's what we're talking about today. The courage to listen when God redirects your path. We'll talk about fitness, mindset, and health, but we're also going to go deep into seasons, surrender, and making choices that don't make sense to anyone else but God. If you've ever wrestled with a decision, felt the step to pull away into something new, or struggled to trust where God is leading you, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's so exciting that you're here. For those of you listening in, what you can't see, and actually on camera, you can't totally see either because your baby bump is so cute. Taylor's setting records today.
Yes.
I don't think anyone's ever going to beat it. She was due yesterday. Tomorrow?
Well, my due date's technically Saturday.
Yeah.
I'm 39 weeks, 3 days.
That's
but
so
who's
good.
counting? Right?
No, you're definitely not you. Definitely not you. So gracious of you to come on the show today. And I'm so excited to highlight your story and feature you. We share some things in common with decisions we've made. And I'm so excited to dig into it personally and also for everybody in your shoes, maybe not with the baby, but making decisions that you've been wrestling with for the last little while.
Yeah.
So first, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and I grew up in the Midwest. A few cities around Michigan my parents took us to, and then I spent most of my childhood there. And I played sports all growing up. We moved to Chicago then after. I was in 7th grade, was there for a few years, and then I graduated high school in California. I always enjoyed being active, always enjoyed sports. And then after I left high school, I was kind of realized I don't really know how to be active without sports. I'd never done that before. So I went to college at Brigham Young University of Idaho and developed my degree in public health and health education and promotion, and took a few courses along the way about fitness. And I really enjoyed that part, but it never felt like, oh, I can make a living out of this, you know? And to be honest, my intentions, I had met my husband the first weekend of college, which was not in my plans.
Freshman.
Yeah, freshman.
Year.
My freshman year, I met him. And a year later, we were married. So I definitely wanted to finish my degree. My dad was a huge proponent of that. He's like, this is all great and good. I like you guys together, but you're going to finish your degree, which I really appreciated that support. So I finished school, and then I worked in public health for a few years with Worksite Wellness. After we graduated from BYU, I moved to Southern California back there. My husband was doing commercial real estate, and that's where his connections took him. We thought we'd be there forever. My parents were there. My whole family was there. And I worked in Worksite Wellness out of financial obligation for both of us. I don't know if anyone's lived in California who lives there, but it's expensive. And coming out of college, it was a lot. So I did that. But in my last year, I had my first baby. So I was working, the job was remote, which was nice for me. And I had my first son. And in that time, after I had him, I was into exercising. I began doing that in college because my husband was cute and he was going to the gym. So I was like, okay, I'll figure this workout thing out with him.
Great motivation.
Yeah. This is a cute guy. You'll go and do it. So, I began really working on fitness and began to be a lot more interested in it. And then I decided to start sharing my workouts online. But it was kind of an epiphany, but it was also made me nervous because, that was end of 2016, beginning 2017. So it was still kind of taboo to do things like that. I felt like, at least in my generation. So I began doing that. And I like to nicely say about myself, I'm a very calculated risk taker, meaning like I'm just a wuss. I'm not going to jump into anything without thinking long and hard about it. So I actually worked my worksite wellness job for a year while I began a fitness Instagram account and started selling ebooks of fitness accounts for mostly young moms, because I realized I wanted more direction and instruction that way. And I also felt like I don't have time to go to a gym. So I was kind of like this little niche of, you can be home and have a great workout and you can take care of yourself, but you can do it quickly. So that's when MacFit was born. But it took me a full year of working 2 jobs before I was like, okay, this is equal. This makes sense. I can now leave public health to jump into my own thing. That's kind of my MO. It's like my dirty laundry I'm airing out. Like, I just can't take those jumps without taking a lot of time. So, yeah, I started MacFit in 2017, and I did it for 5 years and absolutely loved it.
I love it. So we're going to jump into some transition points, but I'd love to first talk about health and women and wellness and why you're so passionate about it. And if we can just give a couple tips for women who are feeling this. I think we've all been there at different phases of womanhood where you have lots of time. Maybe you have a gym that has childcare if you have kids, or you have very little time. You're trying to squeeze it in. Any tips for wellness or how you talk about or think about wellness for women out there?
Yeah, I love that question. I loved fitness for moms, especially. My audience was all females, but predominantly it was mothers, because I think when you begin childbearing years, and then from then on, it's almost like my priority now is my family, which is amazing. But oftentimes I think women lose themselves along that process and don't give themselves enough grace for the amount that they do for their families. And it felt like my greatest gift to be able to tell these moms, like, you need to give yourself more grace, and you can feel so good about yourself again through taking care of yourself. And that looks different for everyone, right? And so I think my approach has always been very simple. It's been get in movement daily, whatever that looks like for you, whatever is your favorite way to do that. Eat whole foods as much as you can. And take care of yourself mentally. And so whether that's, I can get up early in the morning and have a moment to myself, or fit it in during a nap time, or even after the kids are down, it's important to take a minute to yourself, whatever way that looks like for you. And so my approach was simple. It wasn't, personally counting macros very strictly. It's not like you need to be in the gym this amount of time, but it was very much so I need you to move and take care of yourself. So I think finding whatever part of fitness you like is key. I told women all the time, like, I enjoy lifting weights. I enjoy HIIT. I enjoy running. And if you don't, I'm not your trainer, and that's okay. But you can find someone that will help you, better your body in whatever way you're choosing to.
I love it. I actually thought for a time I was going to be a therapist. So I did a few things in therapy, and the podcast has been a good supplement, feeling like, oh, people are still in the chair. We're having good conversation here. But there's so much research and literature around the fit from a counselor, a therapist, and the client, way more than the style they do or how they teach. And so I haven't actually thought about this in fitness. Finding someone, even if it's online or the book or something that really makes you feel empowered and excited to go do that thing.
Right.
Because that's a big part of it. Like, not just I want to look like them, or I feel bad and somehow I feel better if I look at them and it's like, see, I'm not fit enough. And then now I'm going to go work out harder because I feel bad about myself. But like, who's someone I could actually emulate who is healthy?
Right.
And that could be how they eat and how they fit it in their day, or maybe they're a mom like you or things like that. But I haven't thought about that shopping around for someone who makes you feel empowered,
for sure,
and excited.
Yes. And that's everything. I think I didn't realize when I stepped into fitness that the part I loved so much about it was being a cheerleader and being able to be that support when maybe they hadn't been able to have access to that before, and to say, you can do this. Like, I know that it's hard. I know your life is chaos, but you can do this. And when you do, you're going to feel like you can conquer anything. And so I loved it. I loved being that cheerleader. And I mean, I made lifelong friends, through these clients and these MacFit ladies, and they're just wonderful. But to be able to be that person for someone was so fulfilling to me.
So cool. And fun that you didn't think about that being what you love. I think a lot of times we go into work or career or whatever it is, maybe volunteer work, and we go for one reason. And then there's another reason that really hooks us. And that is the thing that's so fulfilling. And we need women who cheer us on.
Right.
We just do.
Right.
We all do. Especially as we're more and more isolated in our own homes. It's so nice to hear another woman say, I've been where you are and you can.
Yeah.
You can do this.
And that was a nice mindset shift for me in the online space. I was very hesitant to be online and social media. I was a user, but not that heavily. And so finding that balance through marketing my business through Instagram was tricky for a long time, for most of the time, to be honest with you. But I realized that so many women connect online. And so it was nice. Like, MacFit was global, which was really cool. Like, it wasn't just locally. And I loved being able to have access to so many women in so many different, parts of the world, because they needed that camaraderie. And to have an online space was a really positive experience.
Any tips? I wasn't going to go here. Any tips for women who are doing work online in balancing that, in finding the authenticity online?
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, we know that it's hard.
Yes.
It's really hard. And I got
Yes.
off for a few years and thought
Yes.
I was going to be off forever. And was
Yes.
even now on the Instagram that I run for Lean In With Lizzy, it's like this constant battle because I want to show up so real.
Mm-hmm.
And I also need to be there to promote things.
Yeah.
And so how to be real, but be something that the algorithm is going to show to the people who are following. Like, there's an internal battle. And part of it's like, I want to have these conversations and I want women to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually want to be spending a lot of time online.
Right.
Any thoughts there?
Oh, so many. I felt like, and that was the one thing I realized, that as my app grew, I was needing to be online more. And so that was really tricky for me because I had little babies and they didn't understand, like, mom is working right now. Mom is this. Like, I hadn't outsourced anything. It was a one-woman show. And so I was like working 20 times a day in these increments, trying to figure it all out. So that pull was difficult for me. But I will say, when you realize that people have found you because they like you, it makes it easier to show up authentically, because there's 1,000,001 fitness trainers online. So I realized the women that were there, yes, they liked their workouts, but they liked me. And so the more I can show up as me is great. And I also will say, I feel like your community builds on like-minded women. And I felt like as I was more honest with, my clients and in that space, saying, these are my boundaries now because I am in a new stage of life. And I just hope you can respect that I've got to step back sometimes, or I'm actually not going to be available anymore after these hours. Because in the beginning, it was 24 hours a day, when I was trying to grow my account. And I will say, the platforms of social media, I think across the board, have changed so much since 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Reels weren't a thing. It wasn't short clipped. When my account really grew, which I can only attest to divine intervention. I'm Christian. I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, and I believe heavily in divine intervention. But it was during COVID 2020. And I began doing full-length workouts and live ones. And that's when it just all kind of blew up. So it was tricky for me to navigate being so present, and then also being like, okay, that was kind of a lot and I'm running on low. So now I need to set these new boundaries. So I think showing up authentically is important, because I think the women that will gravitate towards you will respect the new boundaries that you need to set for yourself. It doesn't make it easy though, because when you made yourself so accessible, you're like, oh my goodness, I feel like I can't pull back. But I just told myself, I'm going to do it as best I can and in a way that's respectful to them and still helpful to them. But it's hard. It's
I love that.
Really hard balance.
But that's really good advice, not just for women working online. That's really good advice for women working in any way, in or outside the home, feeling like, but I want to help. Right. I want to be there for everyone at all the time. And I feel like that can be our default mode, that I just want to help. Like it's all really well-intentioned. Yes. But I don't help anyone when I'm not honest with the fact that this is all I can give to this part of my life. When you overpromise and underdeliver, nobody's happy. No. You feel rotten and everyone else you've overpromised to aren't happy too. And we need to remember we have each other. You aren't going to be the answer, just like I'm not going to be the answer for everyone out there. And so it's okay. I'm the answer for who I'm for. And if you're running a brick and mortar shop, if you have children, being really honest with this is what I can give and this is what I can't give is going to make people love and respect you more, not less, ironically. Yeah. I thought people would like me less. They like you more when you're honest with yourself and with them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the way the social media algorithms has changed, like it kind of was leaning in a way that I was like, this is not me anymore. And I don't know how to do this quick entertainment. And I don't know how to say crazy things to capture your attention right away. Like it wasn't me. And I was so worried about that and it affecting the marketing in my business. But I just had to say, this isn't who I am. And it was okay. It was slower growing, but I kind of had to put my blinders on at that point because it grew super fast. And then it was a nice, steady uphill, doing well still, but not what it was for marketing purposes. I should clarify. But it was okay. Because it wasn't me. And if I were to do that, then I feel like your business and who you are spirals into things that aren't you and that you didn't really plan on, if that makes sense.
I love that. I love that we could go there. I think there's so many takeaways for so many women outside of social media. So that was fun. Thank you for that. Yeah. Let's talk now about the next transition. So you had your first baby and all of that was kind of starting. You've had other children before the one coming.
Yes. So I had my son Hugh and it was just an ebook situation. I remember Googling how to make a website and Googling how to link everything together. It was just off the ground and I had no idea what I was doing as that is the story for most people. So as it grew, I realized that I did want to be more connected to my clients. And so then sparked, I need an app. I need to be able to talk to them more and do things more together as a community. I felt that was really important. So lo and behold, that was my dream. And a year later, so this was 2019 at this time, I think, I was approached by app developers. And my whole thing that I was so nervous about was, okay, I want to do this, but I need help. Like I need a partner in this because I have babies at home and I need support. So I was approached by a few and kind of went through an interviewing process with all of them and found one that I really enjoyed. So then the MacFit app was born. And I went along with that for a while. It was growing. It was amazing. And I had my second son that was 2020. And then at that point, I was super passionate about pre and postnatal fitness because that's what I was going through. And I felt like I really wanted to be a voice for more information for women out there. So I began developing those programs. I got certified in that as well as my personal training license and then kept going. And then years later, I had my daughter, Frances Frankie, in 2022. Which was great. And that's when I released all of my pre and postnatal stuff. And it was so much fun. I realized I was really passionate about that. And then kept going from there. But that year, so I had her in August, the year of 2023 was so hard because I had her. So I went from 2 to 3 kids, which for me was a huge jump. I hear moms talking all the time about like, this was my hardest transition and 2 to 3 was mine. Let's hope that was not that was the hardest one and this isn't coming for me next. So I had her and then my husband's job kind of changed, same company, but he was leaving a lot more, traveling a lot more. And at this time, I also, in my church, we volunteer for positions and, just kind of to help support your community in your church, right? So I got called into one that's nearly a part-time job. And so I was doing that. I had my 3 kids. My husband was gone all the time. And it was so hard. And I was running a business by myself. And I felt like that was my whole year of 2023 was like, I have 20 balls in the air and I'm like doing okay and I'm doing it, but I'm kind of surviving all of this. And it was just this push for a really long time that I was like, I'm doing this, but I don't feel great about it. And it was a weird back and forth emotions that I was feeling. But I finished the year and she got older and everyone got older. And I was like, okay, I've kind of got like my feet under me again. And I was like, I summited the mountain. Like I can do anything now that I've made it through this year by myself. But beginning of 2024, I just couldn't get rid of the feelings that, maybe something's needed to change, I guess. But I couldn't quite put my finger on it, which was a difficult feeling. I know you've been there before, it's a weird place to be in, I guess. So in that year, I couldn't figure out what it was. I couldn't figure out if it was my business, if I just had too much on my plate. I couldn't figure it out, but I had done a full year of the hard. So why couldn't I keep going? The app was still running great. Like things were fine. And I still really enjoyed helping the women. Again, the social media part was always the difficult part for me to be showing up in. But that was also hard for me to outsource. I don't know if you feel this way, but
it's hard for me.
Yes. It's the connection that, I feel like you can't get any other way. I didn't feel comfortable someone else talking to the women that I wanted, and I had that community in. It's a tricky spot to be in. So I couldn't figure out what it was, and
everything was going successfully.
Yeah.
So it's not like, well, it's obviously this because this isn't working.
Right.
It was like, actually, everything on paper looks awesome.
Yes.
It's like dating that guy where you're like, why can't I marry him if everything feels so right?
You look okay.
But
like
something's
written on
off.
paper, this all looks fine. Like app is still growing. Challenges are still running. Things are going good. And it's from home still too, right? Like I'm living the dream, the working mom dream, like I'm able to be home, but I'm still running my own business. Cool. That's also cool. But I couldn't shake the feeling. And so that's when I began to pray. And, that's huge for me in my life. I mentioned we grew up moving around a lot. And I think my parents instilled at me at a young age that you need to be where your feet are. And they were so good about doing that when we made these moves. Because now that I have my own kids, I'm like, oh my gosh, you moved us around a lot. Those are hard decisions to make, know? But they did them intentionally. And I know that they leaned on their relationship with God to say, where should we be? What should we do? So I appreciate that I was raised in an environment that, was more on, even though everything can look good and on paper and it's all good, if you're feeling these feelings, you should take it up with God. So that's what I started doing. But my problem was, as I mentioned, I'm a very calculated risk taker, I'll say nicely, was that I was praying like, can I just let me just get through this day, let me just feel better. Let me handle it more. I'm going to keep doing exactly what I'm doing. I don't want to make any moves yet, but just tell me what's next. And that wasn't going well.
Doesn't sound exactly like faith to me, but I know
we know
what.
But it's fine. It'll work. And then I'm sitting there,
and they were all great things. That's the thing. They're all great things. So it's like, again, on paper, I'm living an excellent life,
right?
And you're not afraid of hard work. So it's not like I'm just not willing to put in the effort it takes to do big things,
right?
That are hard, obviously, but it's not settling.
No. And so, a lot of fervent prayer going on. And then I was listening to a podcast that you were on. It was All In Podcast. And you were talking about all of the times that you have pivoted in your life. And you painted an imagery, which now it will just be forever like ingrained in my brain, that your life, you can look at it as, stars making up a constellation. And that all of these moments in your life are these little stars that make up this beautiful, image that is your life and that who you're destined to be. And I had never in my life thought that my business of MacFit and this passion of mine could be a star. Because I thought, this is it. This is forever. This is my life calling. This is what I'm going to do. And I've done a good job at it. I've learned all of these skills. This felt like, yeah, this is what I should be doing. I'm going to do it forever. And so that was kind of a life-altering thought to me, was that I can change. I can evolve. And that doesn't mean that I wasn't doing a good job, but it just means there's more for me. And I remember those specific words listening, was that I have more for you, is what I felt. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And so I did something that I never do and messaged you on Instagram and said, oh my gosh, that was so touching to me. And everything you said were words that I really needed to hear. And you were so gracious and reached back out and said, I'm so glad. And if you're local, we should get together. And then I did something that I never do and said, yes, let's do it. We hadn't known each other.
No.
And we met up on like a 6:30 a.m. Friday morning to go walk together. And in that conversation, again, it was like heaven's opening to me. You can pivot. You can change. And I will forever be grateful to you for taking that time out of your life to meet someone you didn't know and to say, I've been through this and like, we can do this. Like you can figure it out, and it might take time. It might be uncomfortable, but you can do this. So thank you for doing that.
It was so awesome. It was so fun to talk to you. And I won't forget that walk either. I think when women are hungry and then God puts you in a position to uniquely share a part of your story with someone who is walking in the same path, it's one of the highlights of life, I think.
Yeah.
And all of us as women get those opportunities because we've all been through things that women are going to go through behind us. That's just how life works, whether it's things with your kids, things with a spouse, things with unique struggles and challenges that you have with work and with business in this case. And to have your eyes open, like it's really nice now looking in hindsight that, man, maybe the things I'm going through can help someone else too.
Right.
Because they're really hard and painful,
Hopefully something's going to come out of it.
Not just for me.
Yeah.
But also when you're being used as a tool for God, in those moments, you're given things to say, and it's unique.
Yeah.
It's not you, and for me, when those experiences happen, I'm like speaking in metaphors and I give these analogies that I'm like, where did that even come from? Or my mind has stories brought to it that I haven't thought about in years.
Right.
And those opportunities to be in a total flow state as a mentor, I think for me is like my highest pinnacle of happiness and what I hope I'm doing my entire life. But even if you only do that a couple times in your life, look for those opportunities when people reach out, like say yes. And but like people in your shoes, take people up on it because it doesn't happen a lot. It's not like everybody's going to call you then, or you're going to have all these other people to walk with.
Because it's uncomfortable, to be like, I need your help. Can you help me? To put yourself in that position. But I remember in that conversation, you had brought up effort and regarding people who we've read about in scripture. And now at that point, I hadn't thought about that. I was like, well, can I just do what I do and just tell me what to do next? And I'll do it, but I just don't really know what to do next. And I don't want to take these leaps and jumps into the unknown. But we read about people in scripture that do make effort. Like, bring these stones up the mountain, Brother Jared. I'm not going to just light these up for you and make you across the sea and everything's going to be, I want you to make this effort. Esther, you need to fast before you go and do something really, really hard that could be ending your life. But if you do this, here's these blessings that will come. And I realized, I'm like, I really believe God likes effort and making these moves. And that's something that I wasn't doing previously. And so I decided to make it my mission of 2024, that whole spring season, I was reaching out to other women. I was saying, hey, can I talk to you about this? I'm struggling with this. And I was making effort into discovering what I really should be doing, because it was scary, because on paper, everything was going fine.
Yep.
But I couldn't stop fighting these feelings. And I knew, at that point, I knew that they were promptings like from God. They weren't just anymore like, oh, this is kind of hard. I'm like, well, I pushed through that. Now these aren't going away. And so I need to look deeper. So once I made that effort, it was all coming more and more to me like, okay, now you need to listen to this. Now you need to do this. And I realized I was resonating a lot more with the stories of women who at that point in their journeys were saying, I went home. I decided to lean into motherhood. And that was speaking to me and to my heart. But it was hard to wrestle with, because at this point, I had been working for 10 years. Like, I went straight out of college to work and did that and started my own business. And all I had ever known was being a working mom, that title. Mm-hmm. So it was difficult to wrestle with. So what did I do? As Taylor does, I took more time to think about it. And so I said to my developers, to my clients, I'm like, I'm going to take the summer off and see what happens, which was scary for me to do because I didn't know what would happen. I was there constantly, for my clients and for everyone, and, dotting all my I's, crossing all my T's. And I was like, I'm going to take a step back. So I did. I did last summer, and summer turned into fall. I said I'd be back in the fall, and I met up with my developers, and I am so grateful for them because they all have children of their own, and they were so understanding when I came to the conclusion that I need to walk away from this business. And I know it's not going to make sense to you. It still doesn't make sense to me, but this is what I feel that I need to do. And I need to be home for a season. And mind you, when I decided to take a break in the summer, in this year, my husband and I felt like we should have another baby. I had 3 at home. This is 4. It's a lot of kids. But I felt like that's what we needed to do. And so I decided to take the break. And then a little bit later on, we were blessed to get pregnant with our 4th baby. So it wasn't as if it was like, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to have a baby. I'm going to have number 4, and that's too much, so I'll be done. That was never the plan. And previously, I'm like, if I can have 3 kids and work, I can do anything. So it's not like the 4th scared me into that, but it just kind of played out that way. And I had a beautiful summer offline, which I hadn't done in over 5 years. My checklists were optional for the day, which I hadn't had in 10 years. And I felt peace in being home with my kids. And it was kind of like this beautiful bubble of a summer that I had. And it wasn't until the fall that I was like, oh, I have to come back and face this, and put into action the decision that I made, which was scary to do. But I did. And so I met up with my developers and said, let's make a game plan to phase out of this. I don't want it to be abrupt. I want everyone to have access to everything. It's still up. The app is still running. We decided to go to the last date of the latest subscription, so everyone could have, what they paid for and what they expected. I am just no longer there running challenges as I had before, but all of the programs are still on there. So that's what we decided to do. And then the holidays came, and now I'm having a baby, but it still feels fresh because, that was just last year. So it was a wild journey.
Once you made that decision and you told your community and your audience about it, how did you feel at that point?
It was a mix of emotions. I felt so much peace in the decision, right? Which was so nice for me to have because I'd been wrestling with it for so long, not understanding what to do. So I felt so much peace in the decision to be home for a season of motherhood. But I'd be lying if I said it was still not uncomfortable. And I was still thinking, okay, but could I do both? Okay, but if this means motherhood, maybe is there something else that's going to come really quickly, maybe this
Yes.
bigger, better next thing. Like, oh my goodness, what is it going to be? And I realized like, okay, no, this is going to be a slower process than I thought. And I am going to have this fourth baby. I am going to take more time. My personality still likes to be busy. So I started doing other things and, just within like my neighborhood and in my church, do more. But I realize you can still have peace in your decisions, but that doesn't mean it will be easy,
Yeah.
nonetheless.
Yeah.
So I kind of was navigating that through the end of last year, just, kind of missing it. I still do miss it. And it's mainly the woman that I miss working with so much.
Yeah.
So then I've had to lean on, this isn't forever and there will be other things that will call to me. But I also like the idea that I can be home and I can still progress in other things. I think I got really worried. I don't know if you felt like this. I got really worried that if I stopped working, I would kind of lose progress and momentum in building myself into becoming a better version of myself, which is crazy to say because what is more important to me than being home with my babies? Like, why would I ever think that anything could be that I would be stalled in my progress if I chose to stop working? So that's a lot of weird brain rewiring because that's crazy, right? Like this is what is most important to me. So I think I've been navigating all of that quite a bit, but I go back to the peace that I felt in the decision. And I lean on that because time and time again in my life, I have come to understand if I lean on God and if I say yes to these paths that I think that He's putting me down, they have brought me the sweetest experiences, the sweetest memories, the sweetest relationships. And so I need to continue to do that because it builds my best life.
So good. I think it's beautiful to call attention to the mourning process, though. And that's not being unfaithful to say when that dream is gone, that you don't have to mourn it a little bit because you became a new person. And for me, it felt like, well, then part of my identity as this new me is tied to this project I've been on.
Right.
Whether again, it's church service, volunteer work, or motherhood.
Mm-hmm.
People say the same thing about empty nesting years.
Yeah.
Like all the growth that I experienced to this point was tied to this identity. And then to say, when I walk away from this piece of my identity, I'm not walking away from the growth. And I'm also not walking away from God.
Right.
Because He was so present in the discomfort. He was so present same thing, when I started my app and when I had this new website and this new Christian ministry, I felt Him guiding me so carefully because it was all outside my comfort zone.
Right.
And so then when it was the calling to step away from that, it was like, are you kind of putting me out to pasture?
Right.
Are you done with me now?
What am I going to do?
What am I going to do? And do you have, again, back to the analogy of that star, what I see is like, I could see that star and it was almost like I was zoomed in that one version of me as the blogger, me as the Instagrammer, me as the person who is connected with other cool people doing cool things.
Mm-hmm.
And by leaving that one and zooming out, it made that one actually less important.
Yeah.
Which in a way is scary.
Yes.
And you mourn that. And
Yes.
it was sad.
Right.
But then when He zoomed out and I thought, whoa, there's a bigger picture than this one thing.
Yeah.
You're actually saying, no, you're a bigger person than all those little things that you thought made you who you are. I think of Moses. He was the king. He was the prince. He was the guy calling the shots in a really powerful Egypt. And God says, you're going to leave and go to who knows what town, and you're going to marry a woman from there, and you're going to leave it all, and you're going to become a Hebrew.
Right.
But the big picture, Joseph in Egypt, same thing. The bigger picture was, I have something more for you.
Right.
And like you said, for me, motherhood already just broadening who I am to that picture of a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just a few years older than you, and we have our five kids in 4 pregnancies. So same number of pregnancies with my twins. And they're at an age now where I'm seeing them start to zoom out in their own picture. Oh, I'm more than that. And the joy that I have felt fully leaning into motherhood, truly it is. It's remarkable, and how much I'm stretched and pushed.
Yes.
But I don't think we have to compete and say, well, if it's not all in on motherhood, you're not learning. Or if you don't also have a career, you're not as important. Like, I think we do this weird comparison thing, like you
Yes.
said,
Yeah.
from a lot of messages we're getting from
Right.
outside, right?
Right.
I think it's normal that we feel that way. We should, because
Right.
we're being fed messages all the time. You're only enough if
Right.
fill in the blank.
Right.
But then to say, no, God's constantly zooming back and saying, you're more than you think you are.
Right.
You're more, you thought you were only a career woman. You actually can be a mother.
Yes.
That's incredible. Or
yes.
you were a mother and I have this really incredible opportunity for you. And we can't get those messages from the world or our own ambition or trying to fill a hole within ourselves.
Right.
Or we're going to be zooming out for all the wrong reasons.
Right.
But when we zoom in for the right reason, zoom out because God is showing us something, we can trust He's got
100%. And I think that my heart relies so much on that and on that belief that, okay, I don't see what you're seeing. And God, if you're telling me that there is more, and I think I've already experienced the best of the best, like, and there's more for me, that's amazing. And I think it is turning off those voices and the inner things that we're hearing from social media and, maybe other people that are like, you can't have this if you do this, or, you can't do both, or you can do both. And if you're not doing both, it's going to look like this. And I think I really had to stay in my own lane and not look at what anyone else was doing when making this decision, because you can time and time again look at someone else and say, oh, but she's doing both, or but she's like a way better mom than me because she's like full-time in the home, or but she has a way cooler business than I do because she's full-time in the workplace and outsourcing a million things. And you have to just say, what is my journey is my journey, and it is my own consolation, and it's not going to look like anybody else's. And I lean on that divine intervention, right? To say, if you know this, then I'm going to say yes to all of these promptings, uncomfortable or not, and say, this is what's for me. Because then you look back and you say, oh my gosh, I have developed so many skills and developed so many attributes that I now really like about myself because I went through all of these things. And I could never in a million years say it was only from working. It was only from my kids. Like, all of the experiences have leaned into it, developed into this person who I am now. And oh my goodness, I hope I'm better every year. So I am excited now that I'm like, okay, I'm home. So what does this look like? What is this going to be? And who will I become, from this? Which is exciting. And it's also nerve-wracking because I'm a type A planner to the core. Yeah. And so I have to just say, oh, I don't know what it's going to look like. And I think that was probably one of the funniest parts of this exit, was saying, I don't have a plan. There's not really this like, okay, this is what I'm doing because this is next. It was just, this is what I'm doing because I'm trusting in this relationship with God, which I think to an outside perspective, depending on, what you believe, might sound silly. But for me, it's what's right.
So good. So good. And you can't explain that in any other way than saying, take the leap of faith yourself.
Right.
Go try it.
Right.
Go put in that wrestle with the Lord and say, I actually want to go where I can have the most growth and the most impact. And I'm going to trust you that when you tell me, I'm going to do it. And it might take me a while and I might have to plan for a minute. And I might have to be calculated. Yes. But I promise I'm going to do that thing. Yeah. It also brings up something that I think is worth mentioning, that as we look at other women who didn't take the paths that we took, or who are doing things in a very different way, know that we also don't have the zoom out of their story. And we are only seeing a small portion. And there may be a reason they're feeling led to do things that we just can't see. And I could give example after example in my life of women who were like, I don't even know why I went back to school. I pulled out of school. Like, you name the scenario. Right. And they said, I don't know why I'm doing. And then 4 years later, this thing came along, right? Or a diagnosis, or a child that was unexpected, or a need for a career, or you name it. Yeah. That only God would have known. Yeah. And so stay in our own lanes. Yeah. And also support the other women in our lives who look different than us, and don't let jealousy and envy or even like a little bit of self-righteousness come into play and say, no. Who are they to make that decision? Right. To say, it's not my business.
Right.
It's not my business. Maybe they're totally out of line.
Right.
And maybe they totally are following what God says, but I don't have time to worry about what they're doing if I'm focused on what God is leading me towards.
Yeah. I love that point because I think it did take me a while to put my blinders up and say, well, how come they can? Or it's because like they have more resources than me, or because they're choosing to do this and I'm not. But I love that you're saying like, okay, as I've realized, like this is my life's journey. These are my stars. They have their own. And what's beautiful is that if you are following those stars, like we've talked about, and they are too, we're all going to be living pretty amazing lives. And we all can come together in a pretty amazing way. Like I've met you and met so many other women in the past little bit that have influenced me for life, for good, which is so cool.
I think it's when I think about God looking down on us type A planners, thinking we have all our stars figured out and we know the whole picture. And I think he must just smile thinking about, oh, you have no idea what I have for you.
Yeah.
And it's going to be so much better than you think.
Yeah.
And the friendships and the women you meet along the way when you trust him, because it's other women like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember getting the message from you and like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to meet her. This is so fun because she's going through the same thing and she's a woman who trusts God. She's a woman who's saying, I built this business to the point where it's fruitful, which we know takes a lot of years.
Oh, blood, sweat, and tears.
A lot of all, right? And then to get to the point where it's like finally producing something.
Yeah.
And to say, I'm okay walking away.
Yeah.
And God says, and you're going to meet other women like you.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, in 10 years, we might do something together. Or I might do with anyone who's been on this podcast.
Right.
Like, I think when you take a couple leaps of faith, that's the expectation you start to live in. This expectation that it always gets better. That doesn't mean you have more people who like you. And like, again, we have to be careful because the world twists this to like, well, then your next platform is bigger and more people think you're cooler. That's
or you'll make more money.
Or you'll make more money.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not what God cares about.
No.
It's rich, fulfilling relationships.
Right.
It's being in places where you're used by God. Like those are the payoffs, but those are the only payoffs that actually in your heart feel like anything.
Right.
And have the depth and the meat and the richness of like, that's the good life.
Yes. Yes. And I think too, like, as I've entered into the season of motherhood, I think for so long I would say, or I heard for so many times, like, I don't know how you do it all. Like, I don't know how you do it all. And oh man, I could never do that. And that's too much for me. I'm just a stay-at-home mom. To which my reply has always been, you're crazy. A stay-at-home mom is the greatest work you will ever be called to do. That is in the walls of your own home. But I think maybe saying that as a person who was juggling both, it might not have resonated as well to someone who said, I am home now. And I do believe right now that this is the most important thing that I can do. So I'm excited to dive into new experiences and have the experience of saying, I am home and I'm choosing to be home because this is what I feel is most important to me. Again, it's like these experiences that you end up having, all the new stars that line up that you're like, okay, now that I've experienced this, I feel like I do relate to women maybe I hadn't thought that I related to before. And I just think that leaning on that journey is really cool because maybe it's not as glamorous as it looks, right? Like it's not the money, it's not the platform, it's not the this, but at the end of the day, it's none of that's important. And now I get to enter into something that I feel is the most important, which is exciting.
It's so beautiful. I would say to all you women listening in who are in the same shoes as Taylor's has just come through and the same as me, like trust the Lord. Trust your heart. Part of the reason I named this podcast Lean In is because we have to take those moments to be still and quiet and say, I actually know more than I'm letting on. These feelings of discomfort are there for a reason. And the faster we can listen to them, the faster you can make that pivot in faith. Watch what God has in store for you. He does it every time. Mm-hmm. And it may look like abandonment for a minute, but that's not what it is. He's making room for more and for better love and relationship with him, which is the only thing in the end that really matters.
Right.
And so I love, Taylor, that you were willing to come on and share your story and give courage and voice to what I know a lot of other women go through at a lot of different phases of our life, and know that we're all cheering you on in this next phase, whether you see us online cheering you on or just feel it from your home. But thank you for being a voice for womanhood and motherhood. You know that I feel the same, that like the gift it is for me to be a mom to my 5 kids is unparalleled. It's the paragon of my life. And you stood for that today. And so thank you for sharing your story with us.
Oh, yes. Thank you for having me.
This conversation with Taylor hit so deep because we all face moments where we have to decide, will I trust God or will I hold out on fear? Walking away from something good takes just as much courage as starting something new. And if you're in a season where you feel called to let go of something, even if it doesn't make sense, I hope this episode gave you the courage to lean into it. Take a second to DM me on Instagram at Lean In With Lizzy and let me know what's one thing you're being called to step into or step away from in this season. And if you loved this episode, send it to a friend who needs the reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Until next time, lean into your life, lean into your faith, and just watch what God has in store for you.